Well, here we are, guys. It took a little longer than most people, but we're finally here to talk about The Penguin. I apologize for those of you that have been eagerly anticipating my thoughts on this show, especially since it was my favorite movie of 2022 and is possibly my favorite comic book movie of all time. So it would stand to reason to expect me to just be chomping at the bit to see this show, be one of the first people raving about it. But unfortunately, The Penguin chose to drop its episodes at the worst timing period ever. Period. First episode dropped when I was at Fantastic Fest, maybe even the second episode too, and then I came home, and then it's right into October season, setting up the decorations at the house, plus doing all the content for October. Then it's right into 31 on 31, and then it's time for holiday preparations in November. It took until 2 days ago for me to actually sit down and watch beyond the first episode of this show. But in 2 binge watch sessions, I finally finished The Penguin. And I'm here to tell you, I fucking loved it. So the basic premise of this show, if you have not seen it yet, is that you have Oswald Cobblepot, who is the Penguin, the Colin Farrell iteration from 2022's The Batman. And in the wake of everything that happened in the Batman movie, there is some shifting alliances and a lot of opportunities up to grab for who is running the crime syndicates after what befell Albert Falcone in The Batman. And so the whole show is essentially about the Penguin trying to pit the Falcone family and the Maroni family against each other so that he can take control and siege the power of the organized crime in Gotham City. Now, I absolutely loved this character in The Batman. I thought that Colin Farrell's performance was Oscar-worthy, and unfortunately, just one of those characters that I don't think is ever going to get that type of attention. For some reason, the Joker is the only character that ever gets some Oscar love, but nonetheless, loved what he brought, loved his version of the character, and a character that, honestly, historically, I have never really liked. I have never been a fan of the Penguin. I've never really understood the appeal of the character, why he's always like within the top 5 Batman characters. Just never quite got it. I get it with Colin Farrell's iteration. And I was actually surprised, but pleasantly surprised, when they announced they were going to be doing a HBO TV show based off of his character. Not only because I wasn't expecting them to go the TV route to expand this cinematic universe, this Batman universe, but also because we're diving into that character and instead of one of the more premier characters that we didn't even get to see in the Batman. So I was absolutely on board for this show. I am on board for whatever else they want to do in this universe, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But yes, without further ado, let's get into all of the reasons why the Penguin is the shit. Right off of the bat, those of you guys that have watched me for a while and know me well know that my number one television show of all time, and it's not even close, is Breaking Bad. I am a Breaking Bad whore if there ever was one. And what I loved so much about this show is that the further it went on, the more it had in common with the things that I fell in love with in the storytelling approach of Breaking Bad. Oswald's journey in these 8 episodes is very similar to Walter White's journey in seasons 3 and 4 of Breaking Bad, where it's a character that you know is not good. You know they do some very bad things, but for some reason you just like them. There's this allure to them. There's somebody that you kind of sympathize with in some sick way, but then they just start to completely go off the rails and do more and more evil, more and more irredeemable things. And then suddenly you find yourself as a viewer in this very compromised position where you really like this character and really hate this character at the same time. And it takes the incredible performance, it takes the charm and the pop of the character and uses that against you to challenge how far you're going to go along with this character as they continue to do evil before they are completely irredeemable and you now despise that character for all the reasons that you used to like them. And the brilliant thing about the Penguin is that they don't just take that approach with the titular character, they also take it with what is seemingly going to be the villain of Oswald for these 8 episodes in Sophia Falcone. And so you have this situation where when episode 1 starts, you have this character that most of us absolutely loved in the Batman, and so it's a character that is up here, you're watching it for them, you're kind of rooting for them in a really weird way, and then you get the introduction of Sophia, who is going to be the antagonist for Oswald, and so you automatically don't really like her, and you're not rooting for her at all. And as the series goes on, that dynamic starts to shift, and even goes back and forth a few times where suddenly Oswald is this character that you used to love and now you realize is just this absolute irredeemable evil monster. And this person that comes into the show and seems like this stock, power-hungry mafia character that's just taken on the mantle of the family suddenly has this very nuanced and complicated past that makes you absolutely root for them, despite them doing some very evil things. So all throughout this show, you find yourself looking at these different characters that are all on some variation of the scale of bad guy, and trying to figure out who here is the protagonist, who here is the piece on the chessboard that you want to see walk away victorious. And your answers kind of changed throughout those 8 episodes multiple times. Now, talking a little bit more specifically about the characters themselves, as I've already said, I loved Colin Farrell's take on this character, and he is a performance here that earns the title of transformative. That is a critic word that I hear thrown around a lot, which most people tend to just assign it to a really good performance, when for me, I tend to take it more at its definition, where it's somebody literally transforming into a character. And Colin Farrell takes it from like 3 different points here. You have this completely indistinguishable accent where if you heard his voice, you would not know that as Colin Farrell. He is under absolutely immaculate makeup and prosthetics where visually you could not tell that as Colin Farrell if I didn't tell you. To the point where when the first trailer for the Batman came out, everybody was wondering where Colin Farrell was, even though he was in multiple shots as the Penguin. It was this whole argument and debate for like a full week before they officially announced, yeah, that's him. And then you also have the element of his limp and the way that he has these physical mannerisms and the way that he walks to embody the character of the Penguin. So this is literally a performance where Colin Farrell is transforming into this character and is absolutely unrecognizable in every single essence of the word. I love the charm that he brings. I love this sly attitude that he has. I love that kind of like New York, Boston, East Coast attitude that he has, that he brings in here. He's genuinely funny sometimes. And as the series goes on, he's genuinely terrifying. I mean, there's spots where he's doing something that is so just vile and evil, and the camera just stays on his face as he gets this really subtle smile or this little subtle look of amusement that just makes you look at how deeply evil this person is. And it's a character that, honestly, of all of the comic book villains that we have been introduced to in the last number of years, I think that this might be a solid argument for like one of the most compelling, one of the most well-rounded, one of the most multi-layered comic book villains that we have seen brought to the screen in the last few decades. Because we get to see so much about him, so much about what makes him tick, his insecurities, his relationship with his mom, his desire to be noticed, his desire for power, his just sociopathic tendencies with people that are close to him. You get to see all these well-rounded takes to make this fully imagined character, brought to life by one of the best actors working today in a cinematic universe that is literally in its infancies in this like Batman universe, this Matt Reeves universe that has so much potential to utilize this character and even whets your appetite for how well they're going to realize other characters if this is how well they do somebody like the Penguin, which again, a character that I have never found to be that compelling. You also have Kristen Milioti in here as Sophia Falcone, and again, a character that for the first couple of episodes, I was like, like she's fine. Nothing to stand out about her. And then you get to episode 4, and suddenly it's almost to a point where now she is the character that I was most invested in and I was most interested in. And as the series goes on from episode 4 onward, continuing to be this very complicated and nuanced character and takes you on this journey with a character that you don't understand. And then the more you understand, the more you sympathize with her through the performance, and seeing her continue to go down this path of evil has this very tragic essence to it where you understand exactly where things are going. There's many elements about this show that follow a lot of the proven paths of the mafia life, the crime lord life, the street life. And so you see the writing on the wall about how all these things are really going to go bad for all these characters. And yet you're so invested on just the slight little hope that maybe somebody is going to make the right choice to get out of this, to see the wrongdoing, or to just get over on the person that is clearly the more evil of the picks here. And along those lines, you have the character of Vic, played by Renzi Feliz, who is kind of the second hand man, the right hand man of Oz throughout this show that is most embodied with. A character who is kind of this innocent kid that's had a rough go of things. His family was killed in the events of the Batman in the third act. And so he's really trying to fill this giant hole in his life, this hole in himself, with Oz, with the Penguin. And for all of these very misguided reasons, the fact that he trusts him, the fact that he takes him under his wing, no pun intended, the fact that he brings him into this quote unquote family and keeps telling him like, hey, it's me and you in this together. Like they're going to be writing stories about us. They're going to know our names. All of that acceptance fills that hole with all these things that is only going to corrupt him and eat him alive from within. And not only was it just a great performance as a character that you most sympathize with and you're most rooting for him to get out and rooting for him to make the right decision, and you just see him all throughout these 8 episodes continue to go the wrong path, to continue to look at a fork in the road, see a possible future of some shred of happiness, and then see this possible future here where you just continue to go down this dark alley and he just continuously picks that wrong road. So as somebody that always puts story and characters first, I think that this series did a phenomenal job with its characters, a phenomenal job at the acting, at weaving these 3 characters into this very complicated mafia Sopranos style narrative that is very much grounded in some sort of comic book reality. And I was just totally invested in seeing where they were going to go and seeing where these characters were going to end up. And those that are still left on the chessboard when these episodes closed out, completely invested in seeing what happens with them in the Batman Part 2 or wherever else we see them pop up in this franchise. Something else that I absolutely loved about this show, because it is so few and far between to see the level of confidence that they had to do this, is to have a show that is not afraid to be brutal, that is not afraid to be dirty and ugly and gut-wrenching, not afraid to be hard R with not only the language, but the gore and the violence and all of the killing that happens. To have a show that is not afraid to let its villain be a fucking villain. And it seems ridiculous that I have to have so much passion behind that sentence, but strictly just comparing it to what Marvel has done, I can't think of the last time, or just in Disney in general, that we have had a villain in a movie that was just a straight up evil villain and not some complicated anti-hero, not some sympathetic character, not some villainous character that actually has just some misguided views about some things, but really isn't that bad of a person. This show, I don't know whether that was their goal or not, but certainly the end result is to be the antithesis of that and say, fuck that, this is a villain, this is an evil monster that we want you to absolutely despise. Be invested in, but despise. So that when he is in front of the Batman in the next movie or the second season or wherever we see these characters come to blows again, you're going to invest yourself in Batman kicking the living shit out of this person. And I think that's even something, if you just want to talk about the Batman movies that we have gotten historically, that they've always kind of struggled with, getting you to actually hate their villains. Batman's rogues gallery is so awesome and so iconic and filled with all of these just larger than life characters that almost without exception, they always get these incredible actors to give these great iconic performances, bringing these characters to life. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I can speak strictly for myself and tell you that it's very rare that I actually hate the villains. There's always this element of coolness. There's this element of really enjoying that villain's presence. There's this element of fun in seeing their carnage. Like, I did not hate Heath Ledger's Joker despite all of the evil he was doing. I did not hate Tom Hardy's Bane. I did not hate Ra's al Ghul. I did not hate Danny DeVito's Penguin and all these others. Like, they were just fun to watch. But this is an approach where you take a character that in its first outing in the Batman fit into that, where it's a really fun bad guy to watch and a fun performance and a fun to see him interact with Gordon and Batman, and totally shift our view on this guy, where by the time episode 8 ends, you're still invested in this character. You absolutely want to see more and you want to see it sooner than later, but you despise him. You look at this character as somebody that absolutely earns the title of villain. And that just feels like such a rare accomplishment that this show knocked out of the park. And it also achieved this sense of danger with the character where even when you watch the events of the Batman, Oswald never really feels like this character that's going to be that formidable for Batman. He's not going to be that big of a deal. They capture him numerous times. He chases him down with the Batmobile and kicks his ass. Like, he doesn't seem like somebody that's really going to be that much of a challenge for Pattinson. And then you watch this show and you see where he ends up and you go, oh, wow, like he might actually be the big bad of the Batman Part 2. I think they're going to focus on somebody else and he's still going to be this background character. That's just my guess. But if they wanted to focus on the Penguin being the biggest threat in Gotham that Batman has to take on, you believe that shit. And real quick, before I wrap up all this talk on characters, kind of going back to what I was talking about with the Breaking Bad approach and the comparison of Oz to Walter White. One of the things that I always loved so much about Walter White was how he's a character that you slowly piece together all the things that make him tick, all the motivations, all the things that make him go to the good side, all the things that make him go to the bad side, all the thing that drives his continuing to do these bad decisions and to continue to slip into evil. And you did get a good sense of that with Oswald as well. That was it was an interesting way that they decided to peel back the layers on this character very slowly, where you see the insecurity right out of the gate. You see like the initial inciting incident of him killing this character just because he insults him, just because he treats him as a joke. And that's kind of a running theme that every single time somebody calls him the Penguin or tries to dismiss him in any way, there's this very hard-edged response that he has that either ends in him killing that person or royally fucking that person over very soon. But the motivation that I thought was interesting, the way that they slowly kind of piece it together throughout the show, is his relationship to his mother, who is played by Deirdre O'Connell. And where that relationship initially is just a very cliche, mafia Italian character that loves their mother and is just trying to take care of their mother, starts to have these really sick and twisted notes to it as the series goes on. As you start to learn more about how he was when he was a kid and what happened to his two brothers, as well as just like his motivation of trying to keep this promise to his mother, which seems very noble on paper, seems like something that any kid that loves their parents would say, but there's this very twisted note to it when you see it come out of Oswald's mouth and you see how it is manifested in all these decisions that he has made. So by the end of the show, I thought that was also one of the more fascinating elements of this character that is a very different take on Penguin that I have ever seen. And it's a very psychologically sick aspect to this character that I'm glad we took the time to explore it. I don't think there would have ever been time in a movie to show that side of him, but now that I see that side of him, again, adding to just how diabolical this guy is. The last thing that I'll say in the positives, while I've already kind of mentioned how there's a lot of potential for this shared universe, what I love about how they have now knocked it out of the park twice for me with the Batman and now with the Penguin is that this feels also like kind of a statement to these other cinematic universes, whether you're talking about Marvel here over the last couple of years, whether you're talking about the DCEU, maybe even the DCU. We'll see how that plays out, where it really seems like they're picking projects, they're picking stories that feel like they need to be told to flesh out this universe. It's not a matter of, oh, the Batman was successful, so how many shows can we milk out of this? There's been a number of them that were talked about that have been canned since, like the Gotham PD, or maybe it was the Arkham Asylum show. And when you watch this show and you see these characters and you watch this story play out and how it follows up the story of the Batman while also setting a lot of pieces in motion to be followed up, presumably in the Batman Part 2, it just really excites me for what Matt Reeves and company are building out with this universe, to where as much as I love the Marvel stuff when it's great, as much as I loved a number of the DCEU projects, as much as I'm really pulling for James Gunn and I have a lot of confidence and hope that he's going to pull off some amazing stuff starting next year, this is the cinematic universe that I am most invested in, because they have most proven to me, just with 2 projects so far, how invested they are in just telling great stories with great characters that only add to this universe, not just milking it for brand recognition or IP recognition. Now moving on to the mixed elements. I have to be honest, this show did take a little while to grip me. I wasn't really fully latched into this show until I think about episode 4. I was enjoying it. I was liking it, but for as much hype there was behind this show, for as much as I heard so many people like every single week saying, I thought last week was the best episode, this is the best episode so far, for all the comments that I got for a couple of weeks now saying, where's the Batman review? I expected this show to just knock it out of the park from Jump Street, every single episode to just be gripping from start to finish. And it didn't quite grab me that way. And so I was a little worried for a while going, oh God, like everybody wants to know my thoughts on this. And I'm going to end up being the Debbie Downer when I turn the camera on saying, yeah, it was good, but you guys overhyped it. And then you get to episode 4. And that's the moment where you really start to feel that dynamic change of which character is evil, which one is redeemable, which one you're rooting for start to shift. And as soon as that started to go into play, suddenly I sit forward in my chair and I'm fully locked in. I'm fully glued in going, oh, that's what this show's doing. That's what we're here for. That's the name of the game this time. Fuck yes, I'm in. Thrill me, baby. And so it is a show that I think that it's going to be easy to recommend to a lot of people that love the Batman, easy to recommend to people that love mafia stories and mafia type shows like Sopranos. But I could see a lot of people where you recommend this and they watch a couple episodes and they're like, man, I don't know, man. It's not really gripping me. Like, I don't think I'm going to keep watching. And it's going to be one of those shows where everybody's like, no, watch until episode X. We've all had those recommendations that kind of exhaust you. Like, I'm not really digging this show. Well, you got to watch 8 episodes. Then it gets good. And you're like, fuck, man. It should be good from the get-go. So I have to acknowledge that. I do think that after having seen where the show goes and what the story plays out to be and how these characters go, when I retroactively go back and rewatch the first half of the show, I think I'm going to enjoy it significantly more. So it's going to have that nice rewatch value. But it's very much, to go back to Breaking Bad comparisons, it's going to be like season 1 of Breaking Bad, where some people you recommend it to don't get gripped based off of the huge appeal of the huge acclaim of this show of being one of the greatest ever. They watch season 1 and they're like, really, this is it? And it's like, no, season 2 is where it really gets its teeth sunk into you. That was episode 4 in this show for me. And one of the reasons it plays out that way is because this show is some sort of an epilogue to the Batman. And I think the first couple of episodes serves as that, where if you haven't watched the Batman, you're going to be lost a little bit on the gravity of what is going on. But even if you have watched it, you're seeing a few episodes of just characters reacting to this now power dynamic that is up for grabs, and seeing how a few characters have reacted to this now shifting dynamic within Gotham City, and seeing somebody like Victor and the backstory there with why he is the way that he is because of the terrorist attack at the end of the Batman. And so the show, while it's in that epilogue section, I think is where it doesn't quite latch into you. And then as soon as you get to episode 4, and now we're going into new territory, now we're really showing you what this show is about, that's where it really hooked me. So just the nature of these episodes and how they're arranged. I think that on first watch, took a little bit. On rewatch, it's probably going to be awesome. The other mixed element is that they completely tone down, almost to the point where it's non-existent, the ties to the overall Batman universe in this show. The Penguin functions very much as its own thing, where I think you probably could get away with watching this without watching the Batman and would still be pretty gripped by it. But as somebody who is a major fan of that movie, as somebody who's a major fan of the character and the overall universe, it did leave me a little bit hungry to see a few more references or nods or characters or something from that movie or from the greater universe, whether it would have been Commissioner Gordon, whether it would have been Batman himself, whether it would have been smaller Batman villains, characters popping up here and there, like in Arkham's Asylum or something. I do think it's kind of the perfect example of a mixed element, where the show is kind of brilliant in the fact that it stands on its own, but at the same time, us Batman whores are like, man, I see little opportunities here to just have a tiny bit of fan service, a tiny little Batman fan boner moments in here that would not have taken away from the show whatsoever. In fact, it would have added to it for me. So not something that I think hurts the show, but if it was in there, I probably would have liked it just a little more. And going along with that, I do think that there's a small issue that, again, didn't really hurt the show, but I did notice it a few times, where the larger scale of the events of this show get, where you actually have a bomb go off in the middle of the city and tons of people get killed at one point. The fact that the Batman never shows up, the fact that they never reference the Batman's pending arrival or anything like that during these scenes, it does feel odd. It does feel like he would be there if shit like this is going down in his city. But nonetheless, it's not to the point where it's this big glaring issue. It's just, again, something where I'm like, if you had found a way to navigate that a little bit better, I would have appreciated it, but I'll let it go. And now moving on to the negatives. And really, I only had one negative here, and it is a small one. I absolutely love this show. I'm going to rate it very highly. But there was one element here that is one of the cooler elements to Oz, and again, very much in the vein of Walter White and Breaking Bad, where he's like this cockroach that you just can't kill. He's this gnat at a barbecue that you can't swat. He always manages to slip away. Every single trap that they try to pull for him, every time they try to snare him, there's always something that he's able to do to weasel his way out, to talk his way out of it. Somebody saves him miraculously. There's a shift in alliance that works in his favor. There's a series of events that he's able to manipulate to get out of it. And the vast majority of those I thought worked very well. There was a few of them, though, where it felt contrived. Like there's one in the last episode of the show where he's taped down to this shitty, rickety little chair in a situation where everybody in this room knows how diabolical he is, knows how dangerous he is. And yet he's left in a situation where he's able to very easily and almost effortlessly get out of danger, despite everybody else in this room, one in particular, being smart enough to know that that was a possibility and yet for some reason do nothing to prevent it. So there was just a few moments in the show where I felt it relied a little bit too much on contrivance, where it strained its credibility just slightly. Now, the show is so damn good that, again, that's something that I can forgive completely. I can move past it. I'm not going to get stuck on it, but you have to acknowledge it. Every once in a while, it's like, okay, Oz, I love you and I hate you. But yeah, you wouldn't be getting out of that easy. And actually, I almost forgot there was one more negative that I had. I really did not care for Theo Rossi's character, the doctor that is teamed up with Sophia, the one that was caring for her in Arkham and seemingly was the one that helped break her out and wanted to sleep with her or whatever his motivation was. I don't know if it's necessarily the performance, although I do feel like the performance was a bit off, or it was just the way that the character was written. But I was just so put off and so confused and so like not really even invested in what was going on with this guy. I just never really knew what his deal was, what his motivation was, what his place in the story is. And even to the point where you come to the end of the story with Sophia and he comes back into the fold and it's like, so where are we going now with these two characters? Like, I don't know. There was just something about that character for as amazing as all the other characters in this show was, he stood out to me as being kind of the oddball that I just did not get. Now, really quick before I wrap this up and give my rating, I do want to talk a few spoilers. So I'm going to put a spoiler alert up here. I'll leave it up while I'm talking about this. If you want to just fast forward to my rating and skip over this, if you have not seen the show, I encourage you to do that. But if you've already seen the show or you don't give a shit about spoilers, which I'll never understand, let's get into it. So the couple of things that I wanted to talk about is really just all the things in regard to these characters and their motivations. So talking about like Sophia, the fact that she was an innocent woman, the fact that she was this good-hearted person stuck in this mafia family and only got sent to Arkham and got branded as this serial killer, the Hangman, because she was discovering that her father, Falcone, was in fact that person, was in fact that murderer. And her being sent to Arkham for a decade and undergoing all this electroshock therapy and these horrible conditions and all this just mental manipulation that is going on with these doctors, all because her very evil father thought that maybe she was a little too close to what he was doing, which also just reinforces how evil of a character he was, which they did a fantastic job already with that take of the character in the Batman movie. So again, just continuing to add to an already awesome story and awesome characters. And it just caused such a complicated feeling where you see this person put in a situation where she now has to become what they are accusing her of in order to survive. She becomes a killer to survive in Arkham Asylum, and she becomes a killer to survive outside of Arkham Asylum, which again just really feeds into that whole tragic note of her character that was just really captivating. The way that she got no breaks in the asylum, and even the crazy people that seem to be her friends were working against her, just brutally murders one of them while shouting, "I told you I was innocent!" And just the complication of how that scene happened with what she's doing compared to what she's saying. Awesome stuff. And as she gets out and all of her fucked up, just shitty family members that all led to like affidavits and everything to keeping her in there for 10 years. And she just gets over on all of them was great to see. And ultimately the way that things ended out with Oz sending her back to Arkham Asylum, again, with the writing of the dialogue in the show is just incredible, where he tells her like, "You're going to hell." And she says, I'll save you a seat. And you think that he's about to shoot her. And what he meant by you're going to hell is he's sending her back to Arkham, which was just a great way to write that scene. Moving into Vic, the fact that he had so many opportunities to get out. I mean, like almost every episode, he comes to that fork in the road. And his decisions ultimately leading to a point where you get one of the more gut-wrenching scenes that I've seen on a TV show since Breaking Bad, where he's sitting there on this bench with Vic, and Vic opens up to him like he just was, with him in his darkest moment with his mother being in a vegetative state, and he's putting his hand on his back while he's breaking down and crying. Follow that up with the very next scene where he thanks him for giving him a chance and says, like, you're family to me. It was like opens up totally to him. Like, we're going to take over the world. Like, we're in this together. We're brothers. And to immediately, within seconds, have all through dialogue, the Penguin take what he just told him and turn it into something that now has to be snuffed out. And I felt it coming. Like, it didn't shock me to the point where I've seen a lot of other people since seeing the last episode say, like, they were blown away and just were shocked. Like, I felt something like that was going to be coming for that character, but how they executed it was just hard to watch. Where it opens up to him and he just says, like, yeah, I mean, I can't take you with me on this one. What do you mean, Vic? And then as soon as I see his hand go up, I'm like, no. And the way that they played that out with him just fighting and struggling and begging, and Oz saying, like, you're a good man, like, you're a good guy, but family's a weakness because of everything that he just went through with his mother. The way they were almost able to stop him because of his love for his mother. And so he has to kill this guy that loves him like that. Oh, I was already at the point where I'm like, okay, he's a pretty despicable character, but that was the scene where it's like, oh, I want to see Battinson fuck you up beyond belief. I made a joke on Twitter, like, you'll get your review tomorrow after I play through Arkham City to the point where I can just beat the living shit out of Oz for a few minutes. Then I'll be in a mental space where I can do the review. Just absolutely tragic, gut-wrenching. Love the way that they executed that. And then you have Oz himself. And as you start to learn these things about him, when they've had the story about his brothers and how they died, and I think he said like the city took them or something. So you assume like, okay, they were in the crime syndicate too, and it just didn't work out for them. And then you get that flashback where he's a kid. And what I liked about it was they weren't very deliberate about his intentions. Like they show that he's jealous of his older two brothers' attention that his mom gets. They do show him being jealous of the attention that his two brothers get from his mom and wanting all the attention for himself, but they still show him kind of interacting / playing with his brothers and trying to go down in the sewer with them, and then he starts to fall and because of his limp in his leg. But when he shuts the door and says, good luck getting out, and then goes back to his apartment, like, I like how it's not very clear if he did that with the intention to kill them, or he did that and then sat up in his apartment with his mom and just kind of was curious what was happening, but wasn't all that concerned. Almost like, I don't know, maybe they're in trouble, but I guess we'll see what happens, which is almost more diabolical. Like, just outright evil of killing his two brothers is one thing, but the utter indifference of the way that they execute it, where the way that I took it, where he's just hanging out with his mom watching this movie and he's looking out at the rain and like, should I say something? Fuck it. I don't know. Maybe they'll be okay. Maybe they won't, but things will be okay for me regardless. That was so chilling. And then to finally see that his mother knew about it the entire time. And you have the scene where she just tells him everything. Like, I've always known you're a disappointment. You're a monster. You're evil. And the fact that he is so sociopathic that he can't even register that. It's all on deaf ears. He, in his own mind, did not kill his brothers. He's like blocked that out as a reality because that's the one thing that could decimate his relationship with his mother. And so now it is not a part of his reality. And so even though that she's telling him outright point blank, I know and I hate you, and stabs him in the stomach, he can't process that because of his own psychopathic, sociopathic tendencies and just writes out like, oh, it's your disease. And runs away with her and takes her to the hospital. Like, hey, mom, look at the TV. Look what I did. I gave him a bunch of bullshit and they're spitting it out. Look, ma. Really sick, twisted stuff. And the final shots of the show where he's got his mom kind of in her own prison, up in this upper floor penthouse suite, just looking out on the city that now her son, for all intents and purposes, kind of owns the crime in. And then him paying this prostitute to be his mom, telling him how proud she is of him and stuff. Really fucking weird. Like, really fucking twisted stuff. Like, psychologically disturbing that I just loved. I loved that really twisted element of this character that, again, we would have never had the time to explore that in a movie. So I'm so thankful for this show that we're able to get a version of the Penguin that is so multi-layered, and that's one of the sick layers of him. Loved it. But overall, guys, I thought this was an incredible show. If you love mob crime stories, I encourage you to check this out, even if you're not big into comic book stuff, because this is not a super comic booky type of show. If you're a fan of the Batman, this is an incredible follow-up to it. As somebody who absolutely adores the Batman, this does nothing but reinforce how much I love it, just reinforce how chomping at the bit I am for the Batman Part 2, and how much I am so bought in and invested in this Batman Matt Reeves universe. So absolutely love this show. Full recommendation for me, and I cannot wait to see what happens with these characters next. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all my 2024 new release movie reviews. I'm also going to put a playlist up here of all my Batman coverage. I've reviewed all the movies. I've ranked a number of things, so check that out if you're a Batman fan. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.